Some of the cool stories we put up on a nearly daily basis are UFO headlines from around the world, because there's lots going on when it comes to UFOs on a weekly basis, and it's just mind-boggling. And to help us out with that, we bring in our news correspondent, Jason McClellan. Jason, why don't you tell us about the latest UFO news, buddy?
Greetings, Alejandro, and hello, everyone. This is your Open Minds News Brief for Monday, May 2nd, 2011. The Sun published an article last week about Hitler's plan to build a fleet of UFOs during World War II. This article points to evidence that suggests an SS officer by the name of Hans Kammler achieved significant breakthroughs in anti-gravity technology toward the end of the war, which supposedly led to UFO development projects. The Sun's article references the German magazine PM, which published a report last year professing to have strong evidence supporting the claim of an advanced Nazi UFO program. The magazine reportedly quoted witnesses who saw a flying saucer marked with the German Iron Cross flying low over the Thames in 1944. According to The Sun, Joseph Andreas Epp, an engineer who served as a consultant to a Nazi UFO project, claimed 15 prototypes were built. But Martin Stade, who is an author of a book on an area where UFO projects supposedly took place, claims 174 flying saucers were developed at the site.
Wow.
That's kind of crazy. And this is, for UFO researchers and, of course, you and I, this isn't new news. This is information that's been out, and our own Michael Schratt has talked about the Nazi involvement with UFO research. Mm-hmm. But the Sun and some other media outlets have done stories on this lately, and I suspect it's due to, and we've talked about it on the show, and we've certainly mentioned it on openminds.tv, our website, but there's a movie coming out next year called Iron Sky.
Supposedly.
Supposedly. They've been working on it forever. But it is a comedy, and supposedly the premise of the movie is that the Nazis, after World War II, sent UFOs to the moon to develop a base there so they could get ready to attack us from the moon. Well,
and sure enough, the Sun is always bombastic and sensationalistic. Antonio actually went and looked at that story on the German magazine. He says they don't have strong evidence at all. They take a skeptical standpoint and they discuss the issue, but they do not personally purport to have strong evidence to show this. So the Sun definitely blew that out of proportion, which is nothing new for the Sun.
Well, and a lot of that particular article was also sort of pushing the guy's book that what was his name? Martin Stade, who has a book about the UFO projects, the Nazi UFO projects.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it seems like they were working on stuff. I don't know if they actually built something. Built something. I said belt because I was thinking
Move on.
of the Bell.
The Bell. There you go.
That's what I'm saying. And because the Bell Project is the one that Michael talked about, which is one project which they possibly did really build.
Yeah, he actually talked about that on UFO Hunters as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Way to go, Michael.
Yep. In other news, a new book about the search for extraterrestrial life was released last month by Washington Post staff writer Mark Kaufman. Kaufman explains on his website, Habitable Zones, scientists by the thousands around the world are engaged in a broad and increasingly successful search for the origins of life on Earth and for traces of life elsewhere in our universe. My book seeks to bring to life the science and some of the scientists at the center of the effort. A Washington Post colleague, Joel Achenbach, recently interviewed Kaufman about his new book titled First Contact: Scientific Breakthroughs in the Hunt for Life Beyond Earth. In the interview, Kaufman briefly discusses SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, stating that he has, quote, never been a fan or even particularly knowledgeable person about SETI. He explains that after walking through a SETI telescope array, he came to the conclusion that, quote, if we're in fact interested in trying to learn whether technologically evolved life exists out there, we don't have many alternatives to SETI's current approach. However, he still feels that the SETI approach to searching for extraterrestrial life is, quote, mostly a crapshoot. SETI made headlines last week following the announcement that due to budgetary cutbacks, the Institute was forced to suspend operations at their Allen Telescope Array. Kaufman's book, First Contact: Scientific Breakthroughs in the Hunt for Life Beyond Earth, was published by Simon & Schuster and is in stores now.
Great. Yeah, sounds interesting.
It sounds like an interesting read.
Astrobiological book.
A lot of these astrobiology books coming out, written by these astrobiologists. Kind of vague on the ET subject. You know, they definitely like to have it in the title and mention it because it's sexy and it creates a lot of interest.
Yeah.
But many of them, their point is that they feel strongly about microbes and things out there, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many right now possibilities that are presenting themselves that a lot of people are taking different kind of approaches, but usually around the
But this book, I like the sound of it because it sounds like just an overview, a general overview of the players right now, the astrobiologists out there, and what each of them is doing, the approaches they're taking.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
So that sounds like a better approach, because I know you and I every week we talk about these different astrobiologists and different scientists with these far out theories.
Yeah.
You know, crazy statements. They're just these leaps they're making, all for the sake of authoring a paper, and that's pretty much it. They're kind of far out there with no basis.
Right.
This, however, seems a little more safe because it's just an overview of what others are doing.
Yeah, more journalistic.
Right,
Give
exactly.
you an idea of what's going on.
And that's the thing. I don't believe this guy is a scientist. He is a writer.
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
he is. So
Right.
he's a journalist, and I think that's the approach of his book, and I think it's a good way to go.
Way to go, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Well, on April 21st, the National Security Agency posted documents from their technical journal, and in these documents were actually some articles about extraterrestrials. One of these articles was titled Key to the Extraterrestrial Messages, which led some to assume that these documents were pertaining to messages received from extraterrestrials, when in fact these documents were actually related to exercises the NSA conducted for practicing deciphering coded messages that extraterrestrials may send us in the future. And Alejandro, you wrote an interesting article about this on our website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of confusion there. And I go back because if you're like, hey, man, you know, those documents were called extraterrestrial messages. How can they be just exercises? But if you go read our story, I show you exactly how, because it is very evident when you look at the introduction of these articles. And they all stem back to one particular article by a gentleman named Calamajos, who was a cryptologist, a famous cryptologist for the NSA. And he started off with this document about the beginning of when they were thinking about doing SETI type stuff. He talked about Frank Drake and his stuff, and this was in the late 60s, and it was all brand new then. And it was kind of funny because he has this passage in there about how some of these scientists are, because of Frank Drake and other people's work, because there were other people doing this stuff, trying to figure out how many extraterrestrial civilizations there are out there, and they figured probably a lot. But they started to bat around the idea of listening to signals, to listen to extraterrestrials. But it's kind of funny because in this article, this NSA article that Calamajos wrote, he even wrote how the issue is that we have a little bit of knowledge about a certain type of technology, but there's a huge array of possible technology that may be used for communication across the stars, and we only know a fraction. We've only mastered a fraction, so it's probably might not be the best way, because if they're using any of these myriad of other technologies that we're aware of, let alone technologies we're not aware of, it might not be the best approach. And that's the thing, is that we're listening, you know, using our radios and stuff. You know, what's to say they wouldn't fly over and just use a regular radio line or television signal with a probe or something? I mean, if they want to get a message to us, they're going to get a message to us. Not only that, he pointed out the difference that even if this civilization is 50 years more technical than we are, think of where we were 50 years ago. That's a huge difference, let alone if they're 500, 5,000 or anything like that. So it's kind of cool, some of the things he talks about. It's an interesting read, and it's a short document. And then he gets into some exercises, because he was a teacher, on how to decipher extraterrestrial messages, and he proposes some exercises. And then other people did, and that's what people thought were these extraterrestrial documents. But he does have another one out there called UFO Hypothesis, where he argues why it's really important, given the UFO sightings that they're having and the credible people that are having them, when he wrote this document in the late 60s, why it's real important that science and the NSA take UFOs and extraterrestrial visitation seriously. He was really into the topic, and he was one of the founding fathers of cryptology in the NSA. So
I'm glad you wrote the article on it, because you're absolutely right. There was definitely a story there. It's not the story that some people were running with, but
it's not disclosure like some people thought it might be, which but it is still some really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I know you actively search on Twitter for extraterrestrial messages.
Yeah. And I found, in fact, the majority of messages are difficult to decipher and may be extraterrestrial in origin.
That's right.
I can't prove otherwise.
So lots of strange stuff on Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, Alejandro, I know you and I are big fans of the moon. We both really want to go to the moon. Well,
the moon rocks.
Every week we seem to get more options. This one gets us a little closer. It doesn't quite get us to the moon. But Space Adventures, a private space exploration company, recently announced plans to offer trips around the moon to space tourists. Passengers willing to pay the $150 million ticket price would launch into space aboard a 3-seat spacecraft. Upon reaching space, the craft would rendezvous with a waiting unmanned rocket that would take the spacecraft the rest of the way to the moon, where the moon would be circled at an altitude of 62 miles. According to Popular Science, Space Adventures expects to begin launching their trips around the moon within the next 5 years.
Wow.
Right around the corner.
Within 5 years. How cool is that?
Well, and hopefully another 5 years after that, the price will drop dramatically, and then we can afford it.
Yeah, $50 special.
$50.
That's what I'm waiting for. Southwest,
Southwest, you can get the companion airfare.
Yeah, companion airfare, or, think of the miles you're racking up.
There you go.
Holy cow.
Flyers, yeah.
You're going around the moon.
It's excellent.
That would be so awesome. That's amazing. And what if, the privatization of space travel actually makes things move quicker? We haven't seen evidence of that yet. We've got lots of plans and ideas, but NASA, of course, was pretty stagnant for a long period of time. Now NASA's going to go back to the moon, but they're using technology very similar to what they used to go to the moon in the first place. So they've kind of taken a step back. So I'm just very excited to see all this.
It's very exciting. You and I talk about this all the time. It's great. I think with all these private companies taking the lead and doing all this research, developing new technology, it's going to open lots of doors.
Yeah, it's cool, fly around the dark side, and maybe we will find their civilizations there. We can wave. Look at the aliens.
Oh, yeah. I want to see the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
Not the fake one they portray in the next Transformers movie.
Oh, yeah.
But the actual dark side of the moon. Mysterious lights over Lake Erie aren't uncommon, but a resident of Ohio recently captured some strange lights on video over the lake near his home in Eastlake. The witness, Michael Lee Hill, told Cleveland Fox affiliate Fox 8 that his video provides the first clear images of these lights. The video shows multiple lights over Lake Erie. The lights vary in color and may or may not be flashing or blinking. At times, the lights appear to hover, motionless in the sky, while at other times, the lights appear to slowly move through the sky in different directions. Hill says he has been filming Lake Erie UFOs for a long time. According to Fox 8, a group that previously researched the strange lights over Lake Erie concluded that they were airplanes. Additionally, officials at nearby Hopkins International Airport told Fox 8 that planes from the U.S. and Canada frequently take off and land over the water. Hill disagrees with the airplane conclusion and points to his latest video as evidence. And it's interesting because after Fox reported this story, the U.S. Coast Guard contacted the Canadian Coast Guard, and the Canadian Coast Guard came back with a response saying that only at certain times of day and in just the right light, people from the U.S. can see these lights in Canada, and they're from radio towers or windmills, which is an odd explanation for these lights, because if you watch the video, they are pretty high in the sky, too high for a radio tower or a windmill.
Yeah, the video, there was a still from the video on the video if people are watching the show via video. If you're not, remember, go to openminds.tv. You can see all of these stories, and there's links to the video. But you're right. I mean, I remember it was MUFON. There was a big craze that there were UFOs over Erie. People were going there every night and saying you could see them every night. And what MUFON was saying is that the majority of what people were seeing were planes, because there's lots of planes flying over Lake Erie. And I think they were right for those people saying they're coming every night. And they didn't say for sure this is the answer for everything. And plus, they didn't look at this guy's video. This guy only just released his video this week, even though he's been getting them for a while. So I don't know. His video does look a little different. It does look like some lights maybe staying still for a period of time. But, of course, if a plane is flying towards you over a lake, it's not going to show much of a change.
Right.
Especially if cloudy conditions like they were. They have their lights on in the cloud. So it's hard to say. You'd have to see more video and see, the times of days and stuff like that. I know the MUFON guys were able to get the schedules for the planes and show that, some of these videos were taken exactly when the planes were in the area. So I think, it sounds like, because I've seen other video that's really weird, that possibly something strange is going on over Lake Erie, because I don't think you could fool everybody. I think there's a lot of discerning people out there looking at these lights who are like, wow, I really don't think they would be happy if they could explain these things as planes. But like you said, a lot of those lights are so high in the air. Planes, commercial jets, 10,000 feet in the air makes sense. But a tower on the ground?
Kind of a ridiculous explanation.
At least for that video. That video obviously is not towers on the ground. I mean, the lights are too high in the sky.
Right. And even in this video, some of the lights could be planes and some could be unknown, because some appear to have different behavior.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people who witness these lights on the lakes, and they say, we've lived here all our lives. We see the airplane traffic all the time. We know the difference between airplane traffic and these strange lights.
Right.
So, something strange going on.
Yeah. Something eerie over Lake Erie.
I'm sure that headline has been used.
Yeah, I've read it.
But
they use the Erie thing all the time.
I'll give you the credit.
Eerie lights over Lake Erie.
Yeah. Let's talk about crop circles. A crop circle was discovered a couple weeks ago in a field of oilseed rape near Chepstow in South Wales. The design had a diameter of 220 feet. The farmer who owns the field is unhappy about the crop circle, however, and claims the damage to his crops is going to cost him more than $1,000 in lost crops. In response to the crop circle, this farmer has apparently installed surveillance cameras in the field to catch any crop circle makers in the act. He means business. He's serious.
Well, you remember in Aliens where they had those movement detector laser cannons?
Right.
Photon. I wonder if they mounted some of those babies out there, what would happen?
Entertainment?
Yeah, well, they might be able to, if crop circles were made, even with those laser guns, that'd prove there's something crazy going on.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's cool this guy has his camera set up, and it's unfortunate that more of the farmers don't have them, because they would catch something interesting on camera.
If everybody did, they would catch some hoaxers, because there's definitely people hoaxing, but they may catch some more orbs, because people have caught, there's a real famous one that's fake, but people have caught a lot of very interesting orb videos in that area. And I think, I don't know if I talked about this last week, and we're going to have Nancy Talbot on in a couple of weeks, but there's some new crop circles in Holland.
I don't believe you talked about it last week.
Yeah, and she was able to demonstrate that there was some actual burning in a crop circle, because she says people have claimed there's burning in crop circles, but every case that she's seen, it's turned out to be a type of moss that is black and not actual burning. But in this case, they were able to show that there was actual burning in the crop circles. So that's an interesting one. And these Holland crop circles having to do with Robert Vandenbroek, who we'll have on, we'll talk about the details, but they're getting more elaborate and very interesting.
And extraterrestrials, I don't know if they don't know or they don't care, but it's kind of unfair to these farmers to destroy their crops.
Yeah, but what they're doing could be more important if they're interdimensional, whatever they are, whatever's going on. And plus, it's not our crops. I doubt they see the world as, I doubt they honor deeds and property agreements. They probably think, hey, this crop's mine too, buddy.
Yeah, but that guy's the one who has to pay the bills.
Could be like a message, I love you message. And he's like, but Mr. Farmer, I love you.
That'd be awesome, but they need to give us the code to decipher.
Yeah, I know.
Then it would be okay. You'd go, oh, they love me.
Yep.
It's okay. I don't care about that $1,000.
Yeah, pounds.
No, it was 600 pounds, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I converted it.
Oh, okay.
One last bit of news here. The Roswell UFO Museum plans to build a new home for the museum, and their plan hit a snag last week. A paperwork error has been cited for the reason for the delay, but the museum's board of directors plans to reevaluate things after the upcoming annual Roswell UFO Festival in July. A reported 12,000 people visit the Roswell UFO Museum every month. Lots of people.
Yeah, lots of people, and hopefully we're going to be manning a table there during the Roswell Festival from the 1st to the 4th. Don Schmidt will be there to sign his story in our magazine, buy our magazine. He wrote a story in there, sign it. Stan Friedman wrote a story. He can sign it for you there at the museum. And you are just going to be looking, you're going to be sitting real pretty at that point.
Excellent.
Yep.
Alejandro, that is it for the news.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You bet.